The Daimler Dingo rolled through the morning mist with a calm that didn't match the tension hanging over the fields. Its low profile slipped between hedgerows, its suspension softening every jolt so the crew could hear threats before seeing them. A compact 2.5-litre engine kept its power tucked beneath a skin of welded steel panels. It looked like a scout's runabout, until you realized whole battalions moved only when it said the road was safe. And today, that road felt anything but. By the close of the 1930s, British reconnaissance was caught between two inadequate extremes: the unprotected speed of motorcycles and the lumbering weight of early armoured cars. Neither option met the practical demands of scouting across Europe's patchwork of farm tracks, hedged lanes, and narrow village approaches. Mobility needed to be rapid yet survivable, and without that balance, the flow of battlefield information became slow, inconsistent, and often dangerously late. Early light reconnaissance cars proved too tall, too noisy, or too rigid in their steering geometry to exploit the twisting routes that scouts relied on to remain unseen. Their suspensions crashed over ruts, throwing crews off target and masking distant sounds that were vital for reading the ground. The Army realized that without a machine capable of gliding rather than jolting across rough surfaces, reconnaissance would continue to be reactive rather than decisive. This was not an abstract doctrinal concern. It directly affected how quickly units could adjust to changing threats. Protection was another unresolved problem. Infantry fire could shred the thin plating of interwar light vehicles, and the absence of structural reinforcement around the engine bay meant even minor hits caused catastrophic failures. A new vehicle would require armour shape to deflect impact, while staying light enough to maintain agility. Distinct angled plates and a tightly packaged hull became clear priorities, not for style, but for survival during fleeting engagements where a second's delay could end a mission. Communication technology also forced a rethink. Radios had become indispensable, yet most existing scout vehicles lacked both the electrical stability and interior space to mount modern sets effectively. Vibrations corrupted signals, wiring chafed on corners, and power delivery fluctuated with engine speed. A reliable scouting platform had to be designed around its wireless equipment, rather than treating it as an afterthought. The shortcomings compounded until the absence of a purpose-built solution became impossible to ignore, leaving commanders with the uncomfortable reality that reconnaissance strength depended more on improvisation than equipment. The War Office's request for a new scout car did not emerge from theoretical planning. It grew from the visible cracks in a reconnaissance system stretched far beyond its intended limits. The stage was set for a compact machine unlike anything then in service, one shaped entirely by the operational pressures gathering on the horizon. Designing a new reconnaissance vehicle began with a simple truth. A scout could only succeed if the machine beneath him behaved with absolute predictability. Daimler's engineers approached the task from first principles, discarding older templates and treating the vehicle as a specialized instrument rather than a scaled-down armoured car. They focused on how it would move, what it would carry, and how quickly information needed to leave the battlefield once acquired. The defining philosophy centered on stability. A scout car had to maintain poise at speed, and that demanded a suspension system that allowed the wheels to respond independently to the terrain. Daimler committed to a fully independent setup, not for comfort, but because it kept the hull level when banking, climbing, or braking hard. With a flatter ride came sharper perception. The crew could read the terrain without being shaken out of focus, and their instruments behaved far more consistently in motion. Armour layout received similarly deliberate treatment. The vehicle had to remain compact enough to hide behind hedges and embankments, yet strong enough to absorb rifle fire and deflect splinters. Engineers experimented with plate angles, discovering that small changes in inclination made noticeable differences in resistance without adding weight. The final shape was purposeful, low, sloped, and narrow, a geometry refined to keep the machine difficult to target and easy to conceal. Interior planning was governed by the realities of reconnaissance rather than tradition. Radios needed a stable power supply, unobstructed airflow, and minimal vibration to maintain clear transmissions. The design team mapped the cabin layout around these requirements, establishing mounting points that kept electrical components rigid and accessible. Wiring paths were chosen to prevent interference, ensuring operators could coordinate with HQ even while bouncing across broken ground. The powertrain needed to deliver controlled strength without overwhelming the chassis. Daimler's compact straight six offered exactly that: smooth torque delivery at low revs, with enough reserve to climb banks and slip through soft ground. The ideal Scout engine was described as one that whispered until the moment it mattered, a neat shorthand for the careful balance between restraint and authority. That principle guided the selection and tuning of the drivetrain, giving the Dingo a mechanical temperament suited to its delicate work. The vision that emerged was not a compromise, but a synthesis: agility, concealment, and communication integrated into a single frame. In Daimler's view, a Scout car should disappear into the landscape until the instant its information tipped the balance of a fight, and every feature of the new machine followed that guiding idea. Production of the Daimler Dingo required a shift away from the improvisational habits of early war manufacturing and toward a far more exacting process. At the center of this was its welded monocoque hull, a structure that demanded precise alignment to maintain rigidity without unnecessary mass. Each plate was positioned on heavy jigs that locked the armor into place before welding, ensuring that even small distortions were eliminated long before the vehicle reached assembly inspection. The independent suspension, one of the Dingo's defining features, introduced challenges few military factories had faced before. Wishbones had to be machined to tight tolerances, and even minor deviations altered the geometry of wheel movement. Springs were tested repeatedly for load consistency and rebound characteristics, because any mismatch affected handling under sharp cornering or sudden evasive maneuvers. Daimler refused to relax these standards, knowing that the car's agility depended on this exact marriage of components. Attention to internal layout was equally rigorous. The compact cabin left little margin for error, so every bracket, conduit and cable path was specified with uncommon detail. The electrical system had to withstand continuous vibration, steep temperature changes, and the electromagnetic quirks of wartime radio equipment. Heavy-duty shielding wrapped key lines, and mounting points were reinforced to prevent gradual loosening under the strain of bumpy reconnaissance routes. Radios tested on the bench were fitted only after electrical stability met strict thresholds, guaranteeing clarity during rapid movement. The powertrain assembly required its own sequence of checks. Daimler's 2.5-litre straight-six engine was bench-tested for consistent torque delivery at low RPM, where Scouts spent much of their time creeping or idling in concealment positions. Carburetor settings were calibrated to provide a smooth rise in power without sudden surges, ensuring the driver retained control when edging out of cover or maneuvering through tight ground. Exhaust routing was refined to reduce sharp acoustic signatures, contributing to its characteristically muted sound profile. Gearboxes demanded still more finesse. The Dingo's unique ability to reverse at high speed meant gears needed exceptional precision in machining and hardening. The surfaces of the bevel gears were polished to reduce mechanical noise, and lubricant channels were designed to maintain flow even under steep inclines. It became known on the shop floor that if a technician rushed a gearbox, the resulting clatter would reveal it instantly, long before it touched a test track. Perfection here wasn't a luxury, it was essential for the role the car would play on the battlefield. The final assembly brought all these threads together into a machine whose quality exceeded expectations for a wartime program. Its tight build, smooth mechanical responses, and disciplined electrical layout were not incidental. They were the cumulative result of thousands of careful adjustments. When completed, the Dingo emerged not as a typical military vehicle, but as an engineered solution to the very specific pressures reconnaissance crews faced every day. Testing the Daimler Dingo demanded more than a few runs along a smooth, proving ground. Reconnaissance vehicles lived their lives on broken verges, tight farm tracks, and rutted woodland trails. So Daimler handed the prototype over to evaluation teams who pushed it into the sort of terrain that punished any mechanical weakness. The first priority was to understand whether the independent suspension truly delivered the level ride engineers expected, and the results proved striking. Wheels danced over obstacles while the hull stayed remarkably level, allowing observers to track distant sound and movement without interruption. Steering trials revealed another advantage. The Dingo's compact wheelbase and precise steering box allowed it to pivot cleanly within narrow lanes where larger armoured cars needed elaborate multi-point turns. This agility wasn't just pleasant, it was vital for escaping ambushes or abandoning compromised positions. Reversing tests confirmed its exceptional ability to retreat at speed without fishtailing, a capability made possible by the gearbox's unusual parity between forward and reverse ratios. Crews quickly learned that backing out of trouble was often the safest option, and the vehicle made it feel almost instinctive. Noise discipline was also evaluated in detail. Test teams measured how engine vibration transferred through the hull and how exhaust resonance carried through hedgerows. The muted acoustic signature impressed inspectors, particularly at low throttle, where the straight six emitted a subdued tone that blended with ambient field noise. This characteristic gave reconnaissance units a small but meaningful edge in remaining undetected during cautious approaches or when pausing to listen for movement across obscured ground. Communications performance underwent equally rigorous assessment. Radios were operated while the vehicle crossed churned soil, cobbled lanes, and shallow ditches, ensuring vibration did not break signal clarity. Electrical shielding and careful routing of wiring looms paid dividends. Signals remained steady even as the Dingo bounced across uneven surfaces. This reliability allowed operators to send quick, concise updates rather than wrestling with interference or dropout, improving the tempo of decision-making at platoon and company level. One of the more revealing tests involved braking and traction on wet slopes. Many contemporary light vehicles lost composure on slick gradients, either locking wheels or drifting unpredictably. The Dingo, by contrast, retained controlled descent, thanks to its low centre of gravity and progressive brake feel. Drivers remarked that it behaved as if its weight understood the hill, a quirky statement that captured its planted, confident manner. This stability transformed scouting from a hazardous gamble into a controlled, repeatable process grounded in predictable mechanics. By the end of these trials, it became clear that the Dingo wasn't merely suitable for reconnaissance. It redefined what reconnaissance could demand from a vehicle. Its handling, silence, and communication coherence elevated its role from messenger to forward sensor, and those who tested it knew it had the qualities needed to survive the unpredictable conditions of war. When the Daimler Dingo entered operational service, its reputation shifted rapidly from promising prototype to frontline essential. The first campaigns revealed precisely how different it was from earlier reconnaissance vehicles. It could dart through contested ground, halt without drifting, and relay messages with a reliability that became invaluable to battalion and brigade staff. These qualities turned the Dingo into an information carrier at a time when accurate reports could redirect entire maneuvers across expanding fronts. Its major breakthrough came through speed of deployment. Reconnaissance patrols discovered that the Dingo's ability to move silently along hedgerows and contour with irregular ground made it far easier to position watchers ahead of advancing infantry. Unlike taller vehicles that cast obvious silhouettes, the Dingo vanished into vegetation with surprising ease, allowing crews to observe and relay movement without exposing themselves. This advantage multiplied when operating alongside armour, where early warning systems were essential to prevent tanks from stumbling into prepared positions or concealed anti-tank guns. The Dingo's communication reliability proved equally significant. Radio operators could transmit full reports without the electrical interference that plagued earlier scout cars, enabling staff officers to act on intelligence while it was still tactically relevant. Instead of fragmented, delayed updates, units began receiving clearer situational snapshots, and these fed directly into improved artillery coordination and more confident flanking maneuvers. Regular infantry formations benefited immensely from this uplift in battlefield awareness. Suddenly, movement felt informed rather than exploratory. Durability under pressure became another defining asset. Field units reported that the suspension, when maintained properly, retained its composure even after days of continuous patrols. Steering linkages held alignment, springs kept their tone, and the powertrain tolerated heat and dust reliably. When breakdowns did occur, engineers found that most faults stemmed from predictable wear rather than design flaws, making repairs straightforward for REMI teams equipped with basic spares and tools. This mechanical transparency stood in stark contrast to heavier reconnaissance cars, whose faults could take hours to diagnose. The vehicle's low profile also contributed to its survivability. Small arms fire frequently passed above the hull rather than striking it directly, and the angled armour often deflected glancing shots that would have penetrated flat plates. One mechanic observed that the Dingo preferred to let danger glide past, a neat summary of how its shape protected crews through geometry rather than brute thickness. Its designers had never aimed to create a fighting vehicle. They aimed to create a survivor, and in this respect, the Dingo surpassed expectations. Though not flawless, the open-top exposed crews to overhead fire and confined space made long missions uncomfortable. The Dingo's operational record reflected a machine that delivered more advantages than drawbacks. It refined reconnaissance into a disciplined, repeatable process rather than a gamble on luck or speed, proving that precision engineering could reshape tactical awareness across entire divisions. The Dingo's success created effects well beyond its immediate reconnaissance role. Its dependable flow of intelligence changed how commanders structured their maneuvers, creating an expectation that detailed ground reports would arrive rapidly and consistently. This sharpened tempo placed pressure on other units to match the pace the Dingo enabled, indirectly accelerating how British formations planned and executed operations across multiple theatres. The vehicle's reliability also altered logistical planning. Because the Dingo consumed fewer spares than many light armoured cars, workshops could shift their resources toward more temperamental equipment without sacrificing reconnaissance capability. Electrical stability meant radio sets lasted longer in service, reducing the strain on signal depots already stretched by global commitments. These efficiencies accumulated quietly, influencing how support companies allocated labour and prioritised repairs across busy fronts. Its low failure rate in the field helped shape troop morale as well. Crews developed confidence not from sentiment, but from repeated experience. A machine that behaved predictably allowed patrols to focus on observation rather than on managing mechanical shortcomings. Reliable communications created coherence between scattered units, and the consistent relay of information lowered uncertainty in situations where small misjudgments could escalate into costly mistakes. Unexpectedly, the Dingo's compact hull also influenced training standards. New reconnaissance drivers were instructed to exploit the vehicle's tight turning circle, low profile and quiet running, prompting schools to revise driving courses that had previously been built around larger, less responsive machines. This paved the way for doctrine emphasizing rapid repositioning, controlled withdrawal, and discrete observation techniques, shaping the mindset of future reconnaissance units long after the Dingo itself faded from frontline service. In the political sphere, the Dingo's steady performance provided a reassuring contrast to high-profile equipment failures that often drew unwanted public scrutiny. Its consistent output, quiet, functional, unpretentious, gave planners a dependable asset that rarely demanded justification. It became the sort of machine that caused no fuss whatsoever, which in wartime is practically a miracle on wheels. These secondary effects, though less visible than frontline action, proved critical. The Dingo didn't merely gather intelligence, it reshaped the administrative rhythms, maintenance structures, and operational expectations that surrounded British reconnaissance during a period of rapidly evolving warfare. The end of the war did not diminish the Dingo's relevance. Instead, it highlighted how far ahead of its time the design had been. Many reconnaissance vehicles entering post-war service elsewhere still relied on heavier frames, simpler suspensions, or less coherent integration of radios and electrical systems. The Dingo's agile layout, low silhouette, and stable mechanical temperament became benchmarks for designers seeking to build new generations of light armoured scouts that combined speed with battlefield awareness. Its independent suspension stood out as a key influence. Manufacturers studying post-war mobility requirements recognized that the Dingo had demonstrated the value of a stable ride over varied terrain, making it easier for crews to maintain concentration during long patrols. This principle filtered into later armoured cars and even certain infantry mobility projects, where designers favoured systems that kept vehicles balanced rather than simply strong. The Dingo, through its measured handling, proved that stability could be a tactical asset rather than an automotive luxury. Electrical architecture also left a lasting mark. The emphasis on shielding, vibration control, and dependable power delivery created a template for integrating increasingly advanced radios into military vehicles. As communication systems grew more sophisticated, the Dingo's disciplined wiring layout and robust mounting practices offered a reliable model for avoiding interference and ensuring clarity during movement. Later, Scout cars adopted similar compartmentalization to protect electronic systems from constant mechanical stress. Its compact size influenced doctrine as well. The success of low-profile reconnaissance vehicles encouraged planners to prioritize machines that could hide in folds of terrain rather than relying on heavier armor to survive exposure. This idea shaped approaches to tactical observation units through the 1950s and beyond, supporting the development of vehicles that could withdraw rapidly, reposition silently, and exploit cover with precision. The Dingo showed that concealment and mobility, when properly engineered, could outperform raw armor in many reconnaissance contexts. Even restoration and preservation efforts underline the vehicle's thoughtful construction. Workshops refurbishing surviving Dingos consistently note the tidiness of its mechanical layout, the coherence of its welds, and the surprising longevity of its core components. These traits stem directly from wartime production discipline rather than post-war modification, illustrating how carefully the original designers balanced simplicity and sophistication. It is rare for a wartime vehicle to feel as though its designers anticipated decades of scrutiny, yet the Dingo carries that impression effortlessly. the Dingo's legacy therefore rests on more than nostalgia. It shaped reconnaissance expectations, refined engineering priorities, and influenced the design of modern light scouts built long after its silhouette vanished from frontline service. Its combination of agility, restraint, and mechanical intelligence continues to echo through vehicles that owe their fundamental principles to this small but remarkably effective machine. Looking back at the Dingo from a technical distance, its significance becomes clearer when placed alongside the machines that surrounded it. Most wartime vehicles were shaped by compromise: too heavy, too loud, too crude, or too fragile. Yet the Dingo found a narrow path between competing demands and followed it with unusual precision. It served not through force, but through restraint, proving that careful engineering could deliver effects far beyond what its size suggested. Its low silhouette brought a form of security rooted not in armor thickness, but in geometry and speed. This was an early demonstration of how design could achieve protection without resorting to weight, a principle later applied to reconnaissance systems, airborne transport vehicles, and even certain anti-ambush transport philosophies. When viewed through this lens, the Dingo appears less an oddity of its era and more an early signal of where tactical vehicle design was heading. Mechanical behavior played an equally important role. The stability of its suspension and coherence of its power delivery created a predictable platform, one that allowed crews to work without fighting the machine beneath them. This design characteristic reduced cognitive load at a time when reconnaissance demanded constant awareness and rapid interpretation of terrain. Modern designers now speak in terms of crew bandwidth, but the Dingo embodied the concept decades earlier by simply refusing to misbehave on rough ground. Its contribution to communication-focused warfare deserves reflection as well. By integrating radios cleanly into its architecture, the Dingo helped shift reconnaissance from a visual-only practice toward a data-driven one. This change altered how commanders understood the battlefield, enabling more responsive decision cycles long before digital systems formalized the process. Electrical steadiness and internal organization may seem mundane, yet they formed the technical backbone of a reconnaissance philosophy that modern forces now take for granted. Perhaps the most revealing quality of the Dingo is that it achieved so much without grand ambition. It was built to solve a specific problem and did so with an economy of form that feels refreshing against the backdrop of wartime excess. It behaved like a machine allergic to drama, going about difficult work with a quiet confidence that larger, louder vehicles never managed. That attitude, mechanical discipline rather than mechanical dominance, became its defining signature. As the dust of history settles, the Daimler Dingo stands as a reminder that progress sometimes arrives in unexpectedly compact packages. Its influence persists not because it was spectacular, but because it was correct in scale, correct in focus, and correct in the way it linked mobility, observation, and communication into a single, coherent purpose. In the end, it changed reconnaissance not through shock, but through clarity, proving that precision often shapes outcomes more strongly than weight or firepower.